Fight Night Picks fans, Chase Hooper is not who we thought he was, but I will say this, for Felipe Colares, he could walk into any bar in Rio and nobody would know who he is, and he's been in the UFC for 3 years and 3 months, and he's a former Jungle Fights champ. That is the lowdown on Felipe Colares. He's 2-3 in his last 5. I was impressed by some of his performances, but if you do look at it for Colares, what does he struggle with? Well, he's an excellent Muay Thai striker. He strikes in volume and
fast hands.
Usually needs to get hit a couple times before he really gets into a fight, like Max Griffin. I like that about him. I like that about Felipe. And my favorite Colares fight of late was that Luke Sanders fight. He gets blitzed in the first round, rallies in the second, rallies in the third. His last fight was a split decision, lost to Chris Gutierrez, but it's not a split. Like, Chris Gutierrez beat him pretty well the entire fight. If you look at the overall scores out of that one, they didn't make a whole lot of sense. But what I do have to say about this is where Colares likes to strike, where he's a former Jungle Fights featherweight champ, and he did have his first fight in the UFC at featherweight against Geraldo de Freitas. Then he moved down to 135. He is going to be at a decided height and reach disadvantage in this one, so you will see that for sure. But when it comes to those takedowns, again, De Freitas went 6 of 9 on his attempts. Domingo Pilarte went 2 of 5 on his. Montel Jackson decided, let's try and set records. He went 11 of 15 on his attempts.
It was a clinic.
Judges scored that fight 30-26, 30-26, 30-25, and Luke Sanders went 2 of 5 and had the knockdown in the first round. But again, fast hands, porous takedown defense, has a good first move off the first takedown, but once you rinse and repeat with them, you can continue to take Colares down. Chase Hooper, on the other hand, training at Upstate Karate again, so this is another camp there with Wonder Boy. What's the secret of his powers? And I do look at this fight as, Chase Hooper, are his takedowns very orthodox? No, they're very unorthodox. He's going to go for a body lock, try and trip you, try and get you down in odd ways. His striking's progressed, but his striking defense, I haven't seen any big progression out of yet. But again, he's 22 years old. He's 10-2 with a draw. I hope to see a better, more refined version each time out.
This is what I really like about Chase Hooper being at the gym that he is at. Because I agree with you, his striking defense is not good whatsoever. But what I think the problem is with his striking defense, he has very slow feet. He doesn't move his feet very well. He's very flat-footed. This is a pretty good gym to help your footwork, or at least I believe so. If you're training with a guy like Wonder Boy every day and you're in the gym, learning how to be lighter on your feet, it will help Chase Hooper quite a bit because I think his lack of movement has really hurt him in a lot of fights. I know Alex Caceres was definitely a step too far for him at the time because Caceres is one of those guys who, will he ever get into the top 15? Maybe not, but he'll definitely offer a tough fight to anybody who's on the outskirts of the rankings. But Caceres was really able to not only out-grapple Chase Hooper, which was definitely surprising to see at the time, but with his own footwork, he was able to get in, hurt Hooper, and immediately get out of the pocket before Hooper could capitalize on really anything on the feet. So I do think that Hooper at this gym will have better footwork, and I do think it'll help him in this fight. The thing about Colares, though, is if he starts hitting those leg kicks early on, that will limit the one skill that Hooper's probably worked on the most in this camp. So I do think that this is one of those clear strengths and weaknesses fights. If Hooper gets into the mat, I do think he's big enough, he's long enough. He sort of fights almost like in a Michael Chiesa type way, and I'll get to the Chiesa comp in just a second. That's the other thing about Chase Hooper. I never look at Chase Hooper and think, wow, he's going to have 10 more fights in the featherweight division. Like, he's going to move up to lightweight eventually. His frame will not allow him to cut this weight fight after fight after fight, and that's something that is always in the back of my mind. I do worry that one day Chase Hooper is just going to look terrible on the scales, or one day he misses by like 3.5 pounds, and we should all kind of see it coming, to be honest. He is 6'1". I'm sure his body doesn't love getting down to this weight class. And that is the other big key. Colares is a guy moving up in weight. You're right, has fought at featherweight before in the past, but Chase Hooper would have to cut off his left leg to ever make 135, so I do expect Hooper to have quite a big size advantage, and that might help him eat a shot or two on the feet if he does find himself in a tricky situation.
Yeah, this is, again, it really is a clash of styles. I mentioned for Colares that last fight against Chris Gutierrez, Judge Rick Winner scored it 29-28 Colares. The other two judges, Michael Bell and Sal D'Amato, old Sal, scored at 30-27 Gutierrez. So a really, really tricky one from Tricky Rick. But you look at the losses, Montel Jackson takes him down quite a bit. Geraldo de Freitas, a split decision win for Colares over Domingo Pilarte. The other win over lucky Luke Sanders.
I liked him way more than I should have.
Yeah, he had some interesting fights. But again, you do consider this fight as the clash for Chase Hooper in the UFC. A win over the other Tamor brother being Daniel. Where's David been? I don't know. The loss to Caceres, the win over Peter Barrett, the old Slippery Pete. He gets that heel hook win. He was all over it in that fight. And then his last fight against Steven Peterson, it feels like it was yesterday, but it was 10 months ago, almost 11 months ago. And in that fight, Steven Peterson 30-27'd him. He stayed in an open guard, kind of held him down, hit him. It was kind of like when CM Punk fought Michael Jackson. And Jackson just stayed there, held him down, clowned with his hands. Like, Peterson was kind of jawing at him a little bit. It wasn't a good fight for Hooper, and we mentioned it. He was training out of Upstate Karate a little bit for that last camp. He's doing that once more. So I do look at the odds for this fight. Colares open to -110, so pick 'em odds at the start. -165 right now for Hooper, +135. We have a look at the Tapology votes. Surprise to us as they are to you. I'm going to say over-under with the more popular fighter. Going against the odds, I'm going to say over-under 70% Hooper.
I'll say under, but it'll be the favorite.
It's slightly under. 562 total votes, 64% for Hooper, 65% by submission for the 36% that have Colares, 84% by decision. So Matt, Chase Hooper, again, has the X factors that cause Colares to kind of wilt a little bit in some of his fights, and Colares also has the flip side of that. He mixes in a little bit of wrestling, but that could be to a detriment, especially against a bigger guy in Hooper. But he definitely has the speed and the striking advantage in this matchup out of Team Nogueira. And we saw a guy out of that camp debut a couple weeks ago in Cledison Rodriguez. I know he lost, but still that Nogueira connection.
So here's just the question I have for you. In hockey, what's normally like the prime age for a player? When do they normally hit their prime and end their prime?
Well, you're Alex Ovechkin, it goes forever.
What's in general, though?
Right now, it's really, really young. Like, entry-level deal. Like, you're talking guys that are 22 to 25 are hitting primes.
And I love basketball. And in basketball, normally from like 22 to 28 when you're in your athletic prime, that's all you have. And then you rely on your skills sort of after that when your athletic peak starts to diminish. MMA's weird this way. You don't really hit your prime until you are 29, 30 years old because there's a lot of information to learn in this sport. And the more that we've covered this, that's sort of the more that I've figured out. There's so many weaknesses in MMA that people can take advantage of that's really sort of how everybody gets into the top 5. You just have to shore up enough holes in your game and have one strength good enough to sort of carry you to the top. For Chase Hooper being signed so young, it's a huge disservice to his career because I think it's setting him back multiple years. If Hooper was allowed to just develop on the regional scene, maybe he wouldn't have got this connection to upstate New York, so maybe stylistically he wouldn't be the same fighter.
Upstate Karate, it's not New York.
Sorry, Upstate Karate, I don't know why that's such a metal block for me, but anyways, for Hooper, he may not have made this connection, he might not be at this gym, but you get the idea. He'd still be on the regional scene, and he'd have a much better record than the one that he does now. He'd probably be like 17-2, maybe 17-3. He might even have a title in like an LFA or some regional scene. You get the idea. He would be allowed to build on his base skills a lot more effectively and then work his way up to the UFC level from there. Right now, he's taking a lot of damage in a lot of his fights, though, and he is really young, and that's never really something you want to see. Like, you're right. Steven Peterson beat the brakes off him, and he did take quite a bit of damage in that fight. David Tamor's younger brother, who is not great, Daniel Tamor, was able to rock Chase Hooper at the start of their fight, and he hurt him bad in the early going of that fight. A lot of people remember how great the finish was, but you also have to remember how we got to that finish. Hooper got hurt, and again, the Alex Caceres fight, he got hurt a lot too, so I'm a little worried just about where Hooper is in his career for where he should be, because I think he should just be a regional guy right now. I do think his size is going to play a big factor in this fight because he is going to be much bigger, I expect. But I do think Felipe Colares, if he's able to keep Chase Hooper off of him, especially early on with some of those weird takedown attempts like you had mentioned, I think he should be able to beat him up on the feet.
And Colares, I do like the leg kicks out of him, so I am going with the former Jungle Fights fighter out of Rio who could walk into any bar and nobody would know who he is. Both of us going with Felipe Colares. If you love the submission abilities out of Chase Hooper, the promising, I guess, aspects of this big prospect, let us know down below in that comment section. But again, both of us with Brazil's Colares, a big-time fight coming up. In the main event, you have Ketlen Vieira taking on Holm, possible next challenger between, or after Pena Nunes. Ultimate Fighter 30, are you watching it? Either way, keep locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it.